Hey everybody! I haven't posted a video in a long time, and I just really wanted to kind of express myself about what I've been going through, where I am in my life, and the life lessons that I've learned here fairly recently. It's probably been over a span of maybe like 5 years now, and before then I was posting a lot of videos. I was having a lot of like self-discovery. I was really like focused on my inner growth and expanding within myself, learning myself, but I hadn't really quite like put myself out there yet. So the past 5 years have been me putting myself out there. You know, I got my job. I was working a lot of different jobs, but I've stayed with this job that I'm working at now for the past 5 years. And that in of itself has been a huge growing experience. I remember there being a time where I never thought I would like be able to stay at one job for a long period of time, because I just couldn't see myself like being that stable, I guess. You know, I'm just such a gypsy soul, and but I never really had much stability in my life before then. Like, I had been so out of touch with what that felt like, and I was really craving that. I was really craving a very grounded existence. Even though I was like super into the spiritual community, I really didn't want to be bouncing around everywhere. Though a part of me wanted to have these adventures that I saw all my friends having in the spiritual community, I also like was really interested in experiencing groundedness, since it had been so uncommon in my life up until that point. And you know, there was always something changing. So I had my first job. I had the first job that I stayed with for a very long time. You know, I'm young, so of course, you know, I haven't worked that many jobs, but I've had experiences with some other ones, and this by far has been my favorite. I have learned so many life lessons along the way, and it's been kind of like this anchor for me during the storms that I've gone through, especially in relationships. But I'll get more to that, you know. I'll talk more on that in a second, but really what I wanted to focus on talking about was I had so many different self-discoveries in 2011, and I learned so much about what I really believed life was about, and I just was constantly having like these downloads of like what's really important in life, and I was really learning how to love myself, and I was very full of this sense of self-love. And so that kind of got tested when I started putting myself out there and having these relationships. But, you know, I had these kind of like mottos that I was sort of living by. And, you know, even though they hadn't been tested yet, I didn't necessarily know how true they were. I really, really believed in them. And you know, that was something that I had to kind of like piece together over the last few years and see like really what I still believed in and what I was like, no, that's not really how life is. But I will tell you this, I had a fear, because see, I was in a very positive place, more than I had ever been in my entire life, honestly, and I felt so powerful and beautiful and succulent and amazing, and I was kind of afraid of losing that, like, and what would happen as life went on. And I was also sort of afraid of what would happen if I wasn't positive anymore, if I went into self-destructive tendencies that I knew were there. Like, would I be okay? But I had this belief that no matter what happened, I was going to be okay. And I will tell you, a lot happened. More than I ever would have imagined would happened, as far as like kind of some negative shit. And okay, so I had these different groups of friends that I was starting to create in my life, and I lost a lot of my old friends when I went through this spiritual transformation. But these new groups of friends that I had, I was like, they're going to be in my life forever. Like the same old mentality that I had about the old one, you know, and I put a lot of attachment on them as well. And as I began changing through the years, because of the experiences I was going through, like a lot of them just fell away even faster than these other friends that I'd had. And whether I wanted to keep them in my life or not, some of them just like straight walked out the door. And I was very hurt by that, like at some points, because it made me feel like that I wasn't good enough for them, or that maybe like I really had messed up, you know. But what I realized is that as my energy shifted, you know, there just wasn't space in my life for them, and maybe vice versa. Like we were seasons in each other's lives. But it took a while for me to come to that realization. It's really only been just now, because I kind of had some resentments and it really hurt. Like I felt like I needed them in my life. But what 2011 initially showed me was that you don't actually need anyone in your life. You are always loved, and there is a spiritual divine entity, a higher power, whatever you want to call it, that will always be there for you in your time of need. And so I learned that again, just like I had learned in 2011. These new friends that I had kind of fell by the wayside, and I was in a very sick relationship. And, you know, I kind of isolated myself from a lot of people, even my family and people that really cared about me. But in going through that experience, I learned a shit ton about myself, about life. And yes, I did fall into like quite a depressed place. Like it's hilarious. Well, okay, irony is pretty funny to me. So I say this from a place of love. Like I'm not downing myself at all, but it's really funny because I was at such a high place. Like I really had come into myself and really like discovered what I wanted from my life and all of this. And then bam, like I'm thrown into this relationship. And there were a couple more like kind of damaging relationships before that, but this one was like the kicker. And it like changed my complete worldview like so quickly. And I was up here and I went all the way down, like worse than, maybe like about as bad as 2011. But the worst part was I didn't really feel any outer guidance. Like in 2011, I felt like spiritual beings speaking to me and trying to help me. But in this experience, I was like closed off from everything. And I really started to struggle with addiction issues. For the first time in my life, like I just like had no control whatsoever with it. Well, I take that back. That's not the right way to phrase it. I wasn't trying to stop myself. I don't really feel like if addiction's in your life, you have much control over it. And that's a whole nother subject that maybe I'll talk about at some point. So, but like, I really feel like that I like was at my lowest low because I was so in a deep, dark depression and I wasn't reaching out to anyone. And I really like was dealing with a lot of stuff, like a lot of things from my past was surfacing. A lot of pain from my past was surfacing. And then I'm in this really like not healthy relationship, doing things that aren't good for me. And I was like kind of going down this deep destructive spiral. And everyone that knew me was pretty worried about me. So, you know, I felt like in that time, like so much guilt, and it was hard for me to look myself in the eye, like in the mirror. Like I couldn't even look at myself. Like I felt so bad about who I was, because how could someone who was up here come all the way down here? You know, had I not learned anything? And that goes back to what I learned in 2011, which was the turning point in 2011 for me, was that no matter where you are, you can always go to a new place. And I think that's what I want the title of this video to be, is this. The good news is, if you're in a really dark place, if you're at your lowest low, the good news is you can only go up. There's only up. So things can only get better, and more can only be revealed to you. So that's kind of like what I've come to now, is like as I'm starting to rebuild myself, become strong within myself again, I realize that there's only up. You know, I can't I can sink lower, of course, but if I'm building myself up, I can only go higher and higher. Like I was already down in despair, you know? So, that was a huge realization. The other one was just like the importance of life teaching you how to live it, which just comes with the experience. You know, if I stick around long enough, then life will teach me how to live it. And it's very true. I remember having this fearful feeling, like I told you earlier, about getting in such a dark place. And would I like ruin myself? Like, you know, would the beings that like me just walk away, and all these like high spiritual friends that I had at the time, like just turned their back and walked away. And it made me feel like, well, maybe I'm not like worth that path. But what I realized is like, you can't ever go too far. As long as you're still here and you're still alive. Like I always can forgive myself. I always can start over. And the truth is that in this life, I am going to make big mistakes. We all will. That's part of life, is making the big mistakes. The important part is like learning from those mistakes and holding your head up high afterwards. Because I have nothing to be ashamed about. I'm living life. Like that's what I'm supposed to do. I make the mistakes, I learn from them, I grow from them. But if I keep myself in a little box and I'm afraid to ever put myself out there, that's really when I'm in trouble. And you know, I said that. All of these things I said to myself before all this stuff happened. I said, I want to make room for myself to make big mistakes. I don't want to be afraid to feel my feelings. And I was so positive at the time that it was like difficult for me to allow myself to feel all of my feelings. I didn't really want to go into a negative space, you know? But then when I went through this experience, I faced a lot of pain that I hadn't wanted to look at. And it didn't make me explode. I didn't blow up into a million pieces. And, you know, some deity of the other realms didn't come to me and said, I'm revoking your license to be a good person now because you felt too many bad emotions. Like, life is life, you know? I don't have to be afraid of what I do. Would I take those experiences back? I don't think so. I learned from all of them. And now, like, I'm more relatable because in 2011, when I was really positive and life was so freaking amazing all the time, and that's the space that I was in, like, I couldn't really express that to people who were suffering, you know? Because I wasn't there. I wasn't owning my pain. I wasn't in that space. When I went through the stuff that I did recently, I've been forced to own my pain, to look at it, to be honest with myself. And now I'm coming full circle back to the positive aspects, because you can be extreme about anything. There's a time and place for everything. So it's not good for me to stay in my darkness all the time and in my pain either. I need to have that positive mindset. I need to be able to see the good in things and in other people, to be full of love, to express gratitude and find magic in the small moments and follow my dreams and have a purpose. You know, not just live in this depressive little hole and hate society. So that's the thing that I'm learning now, is like this balance in life. And I'm stronger because I've owned my pain. And I continue to own that. And when I talk to people, like, they can actually relate, because, you know, a lot of us struggle with a lot of difficult things. And that's why I really feel like I have a positive message, because I can really just encourage people that you can't fuck it all up. You can't do something that just like ruins it all for you. You just live your life unafraid and learn as you go. And you know what? There's always love there for you. I mean, as long as I'm willing to be teachable, to be humble, to be open-minded, then there's always going to be another path there for me. But even when I was like in my worst place, where I was so isolated, I wasn't alone. And when I really was willing to reach out for help, that's the other thing that I wanted to say. The other aspect that has been the biggest lesson for me with all of this is it's okay to ask for help. I repeat, it is okay to ask for help. It is not a weakness. It is a sign of wisdom. In fact, it is highly recommended. If you are not okay, it's important to own that. It is important to state that, to reach out to experts, to people who've been there, and then to be open-minded enough to accept their help. Because the problem is that we aren't meant to do this alone. We are a social society, and beings, human beings, are meant to lean on one another and learn from one another. And we are sometimes mistakenly given this idea of this over-independent mindset, which is very damaging and hurtful to all people. We have to be able to reach out to others and ask for help when we need it. And that's what I had to do. I had to go to groups, and I had to speak to people, professionals even. And also, though, at the end of the day, you've got to trust your gut instinct. That may sound like contradictory to what I just said, but I don't think it is, because asking for help and listening to others is different from just like blindly, obediently following people and not thinking for yourself. Like, I had to also learn that my gut instinct and my heart and my intuition, I can listen to that. That doesn't mean that I'm going to do rash actions all the time. Like, I will temper it with common sense and intelligence. But it is important for me to listen to that, because sometimes what is right for other people, and they have great intentions, is not what's right for me whatsoever. And for me to follow it would be highly damaging and not good. So, that's part of learning yourself, and that's part of knowing what your boundaries are, what really you need from life. And that's a process, but it's a very important one. And it's also been very important for me to just like start to discover what I'm interested in and what I want to do. But I can only really learn those things from like putting myself out there. And I just want to leave all of this that I'm talking about with one really important thing that I have learned from all of this. And that is that it's so much easier to be scared and defeated and to live in a low state, to complain, to just allow yourself to be a victim, than it is to like follow your dreams, follow your path, be positive, be willing to do whatever it takes to be okay. It's a lot easier to be scared. It's a lot easier to stay in that state. And there's a lot of people that are doing it with you. So, you're one of a kind if you get out of that crowd. And that's kind of exciting to me, because to me, it's like, it seems like contradictory that it's easier to be suffering. But the cool thing is that once you do the difficult path and start to crawl out of your suffering and really put the effort into living a different life, having a different mindset, that it becomes easier and easier. And living life, breathing is easier. So, yes, it's effort. And yes, it's having to be willing to be like, I'm not going to just do what everybody else is doing. I am going to rise above. That takes some guts. Honestly, it takes a lot of bravery. But it's so worth it. And again, you can only go up. So it's like, things just keep getting better and better and better and better and better. And you just fall more and more and more in love with life. And it becomes more and more magical. And you have these amazing things that happen along the way. And you stop being as scared. Yes, fear still comes, but it changes. So it's highly worth doing. And it's your life. That's the way I see it, is I'm only here once, so YOLO, for me, what that means is like, I'm not going to let fear rule my life. And it's a process, like on my timetable, because I have messed up a lot and made many mistakes in this area. And the whole point is not judging myself and not always listening to that inner critic. Well, I can listen to the inner critic, but it's more about being like, I hear you. That's not the reality of the situation, but I hear you. And so again, you're not going to explode if you feel all of your emotions or make some mistakes. It's just more about like what you do with it. And there are a lot of people out there that are willing to help. So we're not alone. It may seem like a really difficult task, but it's a lot easier when you have other people beside you helping you along the way. And now I do. I really am surrounded with really positive people that are able to call me on my BS. And, I need that in my life. So I'm very grateful for this journey so far. And I hope that helped some of my little life lessons I've learned along the way so far.